Most people think success is about working harder. It's not. It's about thinking smarter. Strategic thinking is the hidden superpower that turns ordinary effort into extraordinary results. When you learn to think with purpose instead of reacting on impulse, life stops controlling you, and you start controlling the game. Before every mistake, there's a moment people ignore: the pause. Winners pause. They don't react emotionally. They respond intentionally. That single gap between impulse and action is where power, clarity, and control are born. If you don't know exactly where you're going, every road feels exhausting. Clear goals don't just motivate you, they eliminate confusion. When your end game is defined, every decision becomes sharper, faster, and more confident. Real success is never accidental. It's designed in reverse. The smartest minds don't guess their way forward. They start with the outcome and build the path backward, step by step, until execution becomes inevitable. Poor decisions rarely come from lack of effort. They come from lack of insight. Information is ammunition, and those who move without it don't move bravely. They move blindly. Think too little and you make reckless moves. Think too much and you never move at all. Strategy lives in the balance, where preparation meets decisive action. Most people focus on the problem in front of them. Strategic thinkers see the system behind it. When you understand how the pieces connect, you stop fighting symptoms and start controlling outcomes. Obstacles don't defeat you, surprises do. The mind that anticipates is never trapped. By rehearsing challenges before they arrive, you turn pressure into preparation. Elite thinkers don't wait for the future. They simulate it. They run scenarios in their minds, test decisions in advance, and choose paths that hold up not just now, but years from now. Timing isn't about speed. It's about precision. Knowing when to move and when to wait separates those who rush from those who win. Not all effort is equal. One strategic move at the right moment can outweigh months of hard work. That's the power of leverage. The biggest advantages are often invisible. Those who know where to apply pressure don't work more, they work smarter. A rigid plan breaks under pressure. A flexible mind survives and wins. Strategy isn't about sticking to a plan. It's about adapting without losing direction. When conditions change, panic destroys progress. Calm adaptation creates momentum. Strategic agility is the skill of adjusting fast while staying focused on the long game. Every decision is a cycle. Observe, orient, decide, act. Those who loop faster don't just react, they stay ahead. Influence isn't about force. It's about understanding. When you understand how people think, motivation becomes a strategic advantage, not manipulation. The way you communicate can move people faster than authority ever could. Clear, confident messaging turns ideas into action. Big goals don't collapse because they're hard. They collapse because execution is inconsistent. Small, focused actions, done daily, create unstoppable momentum. Motivation fades. Systems don't. When habits replace willpower, progress becomes automatic. Results aren't opinions, they're feedback. Every outcome teaches you something. Those who learn adjust. Those who ignore repeat. Strategic thinking isn't something you switch on once. It's a lifelong edge. When you master it, challenges stop being threats and start becoming training grounds. The art of thoughtful response. Mastering the power of the pause. Let me share something truly transformative with you that can change how you navigate through life's countless interactions and challenges. You see, in our fast-paced world where everything moves at lightning speed, where messages demand instant replies and situations seem to require immediate reactions, we've somehow convinced ourselves that quick responses equal intelligent responses, that being fast means being smart. But here's the profound truth that ancient wisdom and modern psychology both confirm. The space between stimulus and response is where your true power lies. When someone says something that triggers you, when a situation unfolds that demands your attention, when an email arrives that makes your blood boil, when a colleague criticizes your work, when your partner says something hurtful, when traffic makes you late, when things don't go according to plan, your first instinct That immediate gut reaction bubbling up inside you is often driven by your primitive brain, by old conditioning, by past wounds, by fear, by ego, by the need to defend yourself. And while these reactions feel natural and justified in the moment, they rarely serve your highest good. The pause, that sacred space of a few seconds or even a few minutes before you respond, is not weakness or indecision. It's actually the hallmark of emotional maturity and strategic thinking, because in that pause, you create room for wisdom to enter, for perspective to emerge, for your rational mind to catch up with your emotional impulses. And this is where magic happens. Think about it this way. Imagine you're playing chess and your opponent makes a move that surprises you or seems aggressive. A novice player might immediately react, moving pieces defensively or aggressively without considering the broader strategy. But a master chess player pauses, studies the board, considers multiple scenarios, thinks several moves ahead, and only then makes a calculated decision that serves their overall game plan. Life works exactly the same way. Every conversation is a chess game. Every conflict is a chess game. Every difficult situation presents you with choices, and the quality of your choices dramatically improves when you give yourself permission to pause. When your boss criticizes your presentation in front of everyone, that burning sensation in your chest, that impulse to defend yourself immediately or to snap back, is your emotional brain taking over. But if you pause, take a breath, you might realize that responding defensively right now will only make things worse, that perhaps there's truth in the criticism you need to hear, or that responding with curiosity rather than defensiveness might actually earn you respect and open up a productive dialogue. When your teenager says something disrespectful, your immediate reaction might be anger, to yell, to punish, to assert your authority. But in the pause, you might remember that underneath that disrespect is a young person struggling with their own emotions, trying to find their identity, and that responding with curiosity about what's really bothering them might build connection rather than resentment. The pause gives you options. It transforms you from being reactive to being responsive, and there's a world of difference between these two states of being. Reactive people are like pinballs, bouncing from one emotional state to another based on external circumstances. Their mood determined by traffic, by other people's opinions, by unexpected events, living in a constant state of stress because they've handed over control of their internal state to the external world. Responsive people, on the other hand, maintain their center. They acknowledge their emotions but don't let emotions dictate their actions. They choose their responses based on their values, their goals, their understanding of the bigger picture. And this is true power. This is freedom. Now, let me be very clear about something important. Pausing doesn't mean suppressing your emotions or pretending you don't feel what you feel. That's actually unhealthy and will backfire eventually. The pause is about acknowledging your emotions fully while also creating space to choose how you want to express them or act on them. When you feel angry, you can acknowledge, I'm feeling angry right now, without immediately acting on that anger. You can feel the anger in your body. Notice where it manifests, understand what triggered it, and then decide consciously how you want to proceed. Maybe the situation genuinely deserves a firm response, but now you're choosing that response strategically rather than being hijacked by the emotion. The practice of pausing also builds what psychologists call your window of tolerance, which is basically your capacity to handle stress and challenging emotions without being overwhelmed or shutting down. And the more you practice pausing, the wider this window becomes, making you more resilient, more capable, more effective in all areas of life. So how do you actually build this skill? Because like any skill, it requires practice and intentionality. Start small with low-stakes situations. When someone asks you a question that doesn't require an immediate answer, practice saying, let me think about that for a moment, or that's interesting, give me a second to consider it. This trains your brain that it's okay to pause, that thinking before speaking is not only acceptable, but valued. In conversations, especially heated ones, practice the 3-breath rule. When you feel triggered, take 3 deep breaths before responding. This simple act engages your parasympathetic nervous system, calms your physiology, and gives your prefrontal cortex time to come online. Create physical distance when needed. If you're in an argument that's escalating, it's perfectly fine to say, I need a few minutes to collect my thoughts. Let's continue this conversation in 10 minutes. And then actually use those 10 minutes to calm down, gain perspective, and consider how you want to approach the situation. Keep a journal where you reflect on situations where you reacted impulsively and ask yourself what a more strategic response might have looked like. This reflection strengthens the neural pathways that support thoughtful responding. The beautiful thing about developing this skill is that it compounds over time. Each time you successfully pause and respond strategically rather than reacting impulsively, you strengthen that capability. You build evidence for yourself that you can handle challenging situations with grace, and you start seeing tangible results in your relationships, your career, your inner peace. Your relationships improve dramatically because people feel safer around you. They know you won't explode or say hurtful things in the heat of the moment. Conflicts become opportunities for understanding rather than battles to be won, and intimacy deepens because vulnerability becomes possible. Your career benefits because leaders and colleagues respect people who maintain composure under pressure, who think strategically rather than emotionally, who can be counted on to make sound decisions even in stressful situations. Your mental health improves because you're no longer at the mercy of every external circumstance. You've reclaimed your power. You're the author of your responses rather than a victim of your reactions. And this sense of agency is profoundly healing and empowering. There's also something spiritually significant about the pause that ancient traditions have recognized for millennia. The space between stimulus and response is the same space mystics talk about when they discuss presence, awareness, consciousness. It's the gap where you're not identified with your thoughts or emotions, but observing them, where you're connected to something deeper than your conditioned patterns, where true wisdom resides. When you pause, you're essentially asking, who do I want to be in this moment? Rather than defaulting to who you've always been. And this question is revolutionary because it means you're not bound by your past, by your conditioning, by your automatic patterns. You have the freedom to choose. And with that freedom comes responsibility, but also immense creative power. Remember that the goal isn't perfection. There will be times when you react impulsively, when emotions get the better of you, when you say or do things you regret. And that's part of being human. But each time you notice you've reacted rather than responded, you have an opportunity to learn, to repair if needed, to do better next time. And gradually, over time, the space between stimulus and response widens. Your capacity for thoughtful action grows, and you become someone who moves through the world with grace, wisdom, and intentionality, creating outcomes that align with your deepest values rather than being tossed around by the winds of circumstance. And this, my friend, is what it truly means to live powerfully, to respond strategically rather than react impulsively, to be the conscious creator of your life rather than a passive recipient of whatever happens to you. The power of in-game clarity, why knowing your destination changes everything. Let me tell you something that most people never truly grasp until they've wasted years wandering in circles. Something so fundamental, yet so often overlooked that it's almost criminal how little attention we pay to it in our education and upbringing. And that is this. If you don't know where you're going, any road will take you there, but more accurately, no road will truly satisfy you because you'll always wonder if there was something better around the next corner. And this lack of clear, specific end goals, this absence of what I call end-game clarity, is perhaps the single biggest reason why talented, hardworking, intelligent people end up feeling unfulfilled, frustrated, and stuck despite putting in tremendous effort day after day. You see, imagine for a moment that you're standing in the middle of a vast forest, thick with trees in every direction, paths branching off in countless ways, and someone hands you a map and a compass, but you have no idea where you actually want to go. Sure, you might start walking. You might even walk very fast and with great determination. You might choose paths that look promising or follow trails that others have taken. But without a clear destination, how will you know if you're making progress or just going in circles? How will you know which paths to take and which to avoid? How will you decide what to pack and what to leave behind? How will you know when you've arrived or if you're even heading in the right direction? This is exactly how most people live their entire lives, busy, active, doing things, checking boxes, responding to whatever comes their way, but without clear, specific end goals that define what success actually looks like for them personally. And the result is a kind of productive aimlessness where you're moving, but not necessarily progressing toward anything meaningful. Now, in-game clarity is not just about having vague wishes or general directions like, I want to be successful, or I want to be happy, or I want to make a difference. Because those statements, while positive, are so broad and undefined that they provide almost no useful guidance for daily decisions and actions. In-game clarity means defining with crystal clear specificity what the end state looks like, what success means in concrete, measurable, vivid terms that you can actually visualize and work backward from. It means knowing not just what you want to achieve, but why it matters to you, what it will look like when you get there, how it will feel, what will be different in your life, who you'll be sharing it with, and what you'll have had to become as a person to make it happen. Let me give you some examples to illustrate the difference between vague goals and in-game clarity. Saying, I want to be financially secure is vague, but saying, I want to have $2 million invested in a diversified portfolio generating $50,000 in passive income annually by the time I'm 50, allowing me to work only on projects I'm passionate about without worrying about money, is in-game clarity. Saying, I want a good relationship is vague, but saying, I want a partnership with someone who shares my values of adventure and personal growth, where we travel together at least 3 times a year, have deep conversations regularly, support each other's individual dreams, and create a home environment that feels peaceful and inspiring is in-game clarity. Saying, I want to be healthy is vague, but saying, I want to maintain a body composition of 15% body fat, be able to run a half marathon comfortably, have the energy to play actively with my future grandchildren, and feel strong and capable in my body well in my 70s is in-game clarity. Do you see the difference? When you have this level of clarity, everything changes because now you have a North Star, a reference point for every decision, every opportunity, every temptation, every distraction that comes your way, and you can ask yourself a simple but powerful question. Does this move me closer to my end game or further away from it? This question becomes your filter, your compass, your decision-making framework that saves you countless hours of confusion and regret. The beautiful thing about in-game clarity is that it doesn't just tell you what to do, it also tells you what not to do. And in a world of infinite possibilities and constant distractions, knowing what to say no to is just as important, if not more important, than knowing what to say yes to. When you're clear about your end game in your career, you can confidently decline opportunities that might seem prestigious or lucrative but don't align with where you're actually trying to go. When you're clear about your end game in relationships, you can avoid wasting years with people who are wonderful but fundamentally incompatible with the life you're building. When you're clear about your end game financially, you can resist the temptation to buy things that impress others but don't serve your actual goals. When you're clear about your end game health-wise, you can make daily choices about food, exercise, and rest that support your long-term vision rather than just satisfying immediate impulses. But here's where many people get stuck or resist this whole concept of end-game clarity. They worry that defining specific goals will limit them, trap them, rob them of spontaneity and flexibility. They say things like, I don't want to be rigid, or what if I change my mind, or life is unpredictable. So why bother planning? And I understand this concern, I really do, but here's the truth. In-game clarity doesn't limit you. It liberates you, because when you know where you're going, you can be incredibly flexible about how you get there. You can adapt, pivot, take detours, explore side paths, all while maintaining direction toward your ultimate destination. Think of it like sailing. If you're sailing from California to Hawaii, you have a clear destination, but the route you take might vary dramatically based on winds, currents, weather, opportunities to see interesting things along the way. You might zigzag. You might adjust your sails constantly. You might even stop at unexpected islands. But you always know where you're ultimately headed and can course correct as needed. Whereas a boat without a destination just drifts wherever the currents take it, which might feel free in the moment, but usually ends up somewhere you never intended to be. The process of gaining in-game clarity itself is incredibly valuable because it forces you to think deeply about what you actually want as opposed to what you think you should want, what society expects, what your parents wanted for you, what looks good on social media, or what everyone else is chasing. And this distinction is crucial because you can climb the ladder of success with great efficiency only to discover you've had it leaning against the wrong wall the whole time, spending decades pursuing goals that were never really yours. And that's a special kind of heartbreak that comes from winning at the wrong game. So how do you develop this end-game clarity? Start by giving yourself permission to dream without constraints. Imagine you're at the end of your life looking back, or imagine you've achieved everything you set out to achieve. What does your life look like in vivid detail? Where are you living? What does your typical day involve? Who are you surrounded by? What have you created or contributed? What skills have you mastered? How do you feel about yourself? What are people saying about you? What impact have you had? Write this out in present tense, as if it's already happened. Make it so detailed and specific that you can actually visualize it, feel it, almost taste it, and don't censor yourself or worry about whether it seems realistic or achievable. Just let yourself explore what you truly want. Then, and this is important, identify the different domains of your life where in-game clarity matters. Career and professional achievement, financial security and wealth, relationships and family, health and physical capability, personal growth and learning, contribution and legacy, lifestyle and experiences, spiritual or philosophical development. And for each domain, get specific about what success looks like, what the end game is, because success in one area might require trade-offs in another. And you need to be conscious and intentional about those trade-offs rather than just letting them happen by default. Once you have this clarity, the next step is working backward. If this is where you want to be in 20 years, what do you need to be in 10 years, in 5 years, by the end of this year, by the end of this quarter, this month, this week, and what actions can you take today that align with that trajectory? This backward planning transforms your endgame from an abstract fantasy into a concrete roadmap with mile markers you can track. And suddenly the connection between your daily actions and your ultimate destination becomes clear and motivating. Now here's something crucial that people often miss. In-game clarity isn't just about external achievements and circumstances. It's also about who you need to become to achieve and maintain those things. Because the person you are today, with your current habits, mindset, skills, and character might not be capable of creating and sustaining the end-game you envision. So part of your in-game clarity needs to include the personal development journey, the transformation you need to undergo. If your end game includes being a respected leader in your industry, you need to become someone with deep expertise, excellent communication skills, integrity, vision, and the ability to inspire others. If your end game includes a deeply connected long-term relationship, you need to become someone with emotional intelligence, vulnerability, communication skills, and the capacity for sustained intimacy. If your end game includes financial abundance, you need to become someone who understands money, can delay gratification, makes wise investments, and creates value for others. So your end game clarity should include both the destination and the person you need to become to reach it. One of the most powerful aspects of having end game clarity is how it helps you navigate setbacks and obstacles, because they will come, guaranteed. Life will throw curveballs, plans will fail, unexpected challenges will emerge. And when you don't have clear end-game vision, these setbacks feel catastrophic. They make you question everything. They tempt you to give up or change direction entirely. But when you have strong end-game clarity, setbacks become merely tactical problems to solve, detours to navigate around, learning experiences that make you stronger because your destination hasn't changed. Only your route has been temporarily blocked, and you can assess the situation, adjust your approach, and keep moving forward with confidence because you know where you're going. Another benefit of end-game clarity that people don't talk about enough is how it helps you build the right team and attract the right opportunities. Because when you're crystal clear about where you're going, you can communicate that vision to others, and people who resonate with that vision, who can help you get there, who want to be part of that journey, will naturally be drawn to you and want to collaborate. Whereas when you're unclear or vague about your goals, potential allies and helpers don't know how to support you, and opportunities pass by unrecognized because you don't have the framework to identify them as relevant to your journey. Let me also address the fear of commitment that stops many people from defining clear end goals. They worry that committing to one path means closing doors to other possibilities, that they'll miss out on something better, that they'll regret their choice. But here's the paradox. By trying to keep all options open, you actually guarantee mediocrity because you never commit enough to any path to achieve mastery or significant results. Whereas by committing fully to a clear endgame, you open up possibilities and opportunities that only become visible to people who are seriously pursuing that path. Doors open that you couldn't even see before, resources become available, synchronicities happen, not because of magic, but because your brain's reticular activating system is now primed to notice relevant opportunities that were always there, but that you were previously blind to. It's also worth noting that in-game clarity doesn't mean you can never change your goals. Life is long. You will evolve, your values might shift, you'll learn new things about yourself and the world, and it's perfectly okay to revise your endgame as you grow. But there's a huge difference between consciously choosing to pursue a new endgame because you've genuinely evolved versus constantly changing direction because you never committed to anything long enough to see results. The key is being intentional about any changes you make, understanding why the old endgame no longer serves you, and being clear about what the new one is, rather than just drifting from one shiny object to another. Finally, understand that in-game clarity is not about perfectionism or rigid attachment to specific outcomes. It's about direction, intention, and purpose. It's about knowing what you're building so you can make empowered choices, so you can say no to good things in favor of great things, so you can persevere through difficult times because you remember why you started, so you can celebrate progress because you can actually measure it against your vision, so you can live with intentionality, rather than just reacting to whatever comes your way. And when you combine in-game clarity with consistent action, with a willingness to learn and adapt, with patience for the process, you become virtually unstoppable because you have something most people never develop: a clear vision of where you're going and why it matters. And that clarity, my friend, is the foundation upon which extraordinary lives are built. The difference between wandering through life and architecting it, between hoping things work out and making them work out, between arriving at a destination by accident and claiming the life you consciously created. The information advantage. Why smart decisions begin with better questions. Let me share with you one of the most expensive mistakes people make throughout their lives, a mistake that costs them money, time, relationships, opportunities, and peace of mind. Yet it's so common and so normalized that most people don't even recognize they're making it until the consequences are already unfolding. And that mistake is acting without first gathering the right information, jumping to conclusions, making decisions based on assumptions, incomplete data, or whatever information happens to be immediately available rather than taking the time to seek out what's actually needed to make an informed choice. You see, we live in a paradoxical time where we have more information available at our fingertips than any generation in human history. Entire libraries worth of knowledge accessible through a device in our pocket. Yet simultaneously, we're drowning in noise, distraction, misinformation, and data overload, which means that having access to information and actually gathering the right information are two completely different things, and the ability to distinguish between these two, to know what information you need, where to find it, how to evaluate it, and when you have enough of it to act, is perhaps one of the most valuable skills you could develop in a modern world. Think about the last major decision you made. Maybe it was accepting a job offer. Maybe it was entering or leaving a relationship. Maybe it was making a significant purchase, investing money, choosing where to live, deciding on a medical treatment, or committing to a business venture. Now ask yourself honestly, did you gather all the relevant information before making that decision? Did you seek out perspectives that challenged your initial assumptions? Did you talk to people who had made similar decisions and learn from their experiences? Did you understand the full range of possible outcomes and their probabilities? Or did you go with your gut, trust your intuition, make a quick decision based on limited information because you were excited or scared or impatient, and then rationalize that decision afterward by seeking only information that confirmed you were right? Most of us, if we're being brutally honest, fall into the latter category far more often than we'd like to admit, because gathering the right information takes time, effort, patience, and humility, it requires admitting that we don't know everything, that our initial impressions might be wrong, that the obvious answer might not be the best answer. And these are uncomfortable positions for the ego, which wants to feel certain, competent, and in control. But here's what happens when you act without the right information. You make decisions based on partial pictures, like trying to complete a jigsaw puzzle with half the pieces missing. Sure, you can force something together. You can make assumptions about what the missing pieces probably look like. You can convince yourself you have enough to work with, but the final picture will never be quite right. There will be gaps, mistakes, misalignments, and you'll spend far more time and energy fixing those mistakes later than you would have spent gathering the right information up front. Let me give you some real examples of what I'm talking about, because this principle applies to literally every domain of life. Imagine you're considering a job offer. The salary is excellent. The title is impressive. The company has a good reputation, and you're excited about the opportunity. So you accept quickly, but what information did you not gather? You didn't talk to current or former employees about the actual work culture. You didn't research the company's financial stability or recent leadership changes. You didn't clarify expectations around work hours and travel. You didn't understand the real path for advancement versus the promised path. You didn't explore who your direct manager would be and their management style. You didn't investigate why the previous person in this role left, and 6 months later you're miserable, realizing the company culture is toxic, your manager is impossible to work with, the promised growth opportunities don't exist, and the excellent salary comes at the cost of 80-hour work weeks that are destroying your health and relationships. All of this could have been discovered beforehand if you'd gathered the right information, if you'd asked the right questions, if you'd done your due diligence before committing. Or consider relationships. You meet someone and there's chemistry, excitement, attraction. They say all the right things, you have fun together, and within a few months you're making major life decisions together. Moving in, getting engaged, merging finances, but what information did you not gather? You didn't see how they handle conflict when the initial excitement fades. You didn't observe their relationship with their family, which often reveals patterns they'll repeat with you. You didn't understand their financial habits and relationship with money. You didn't discuss fundamental life goals around children, career, lifestyle, values. You didn't see how they treat service workers or people who can't do anything for them, which reveals character. You didn't understand their past, relationship patterns, and why previous relationships ended. And you certainly didn't give yourself enough time to see beyond the curated version of themselves that everyone presents in the early stages. So when the real person emerges, when challenges arise, when the initial infatuation wears off, you're shocked to discover incompatibilities and issues that were always there, but that you never took the time to investigate, because you were caught up in emotion and moving too fast. The same principle applies to investments and financial decisions. People put thousands or even hundreds of thousands of dollars into investments without understanding what they're actually buying. They trust salespeople with commissions on the line. They follow tips from friends or social media. They chase trends without understanding the fundamentals. They don't read the fine print. They don't understand the fees and how they compound over time. They don't research the track record and credentials of the people managing their money. They don't understand the tax implications. They don't diversify because they don't understand risk. And then they're shocked when they lose money or discover they're locked into something that doesn't serve their interests, all because they didn't gather the right information before acting. Now, you might be thinking, okay, I understand the principle, but how do I actually gather the right information? What does that process look like practically? And this is where it gets interesting, because gathering the right information is both an art and a science. It's not just about collecting data. It's about asking better questions, seeking diverse perspectives, challenging your assumptions, knowing where to look, evaluating sources, distinguishing signal from noise, and recognizing when you have enough information to make a decision versus when you're just procrastinating. The first step is clarity about what decision you're actually trying to make, because if you're not clear on the decision, you can't identify what information is relevant. So you need to define the question precisely. Am I trying to decide whether to take this specific job offer or keep looking? Am I trying to decide whether this person is the right life partner for me? Am I trying to decide whether this investment aligns with my financial goals and risk tolerance? Am I trying to decide what treatment option is best for this health condition? The more specific your question, the easier it becomes to identify what information you need to answer it. Once you're clear on the question, the next step is identifying your assumptions and making them explicit, because we all approach decisions with assumptions, often unconscious ones, and these assumptions can blind us to information we need to seek out. For example, if you're considering a job offer, you might be assuming the company is stable because it's been around for 50 years. But have you verified that assumption by looking at recent financial reports, market trends in that industry, or news about potential mergers or layoffs? If you're entering a relationship, you might be assuming that because someone is nice to you, they're a good person overall. But have you verified that by observing how they treat others when they think no one important is watching? Identifying and questioning your assumptions is crucial, because those blind spots are exactly where problems hide. Then comes the process of seeking information from multiple sources with different perspectives, because any single source will have biases, limitations, incomplete information, or agendas. So if you're researching a company, you don't just look at their polished website and marketing materials. You talk to current employees on forums like Glassdoor where they can be honest. You talk to competitors and industry analysts who have outside perspectives. You read news articles and financial filings. You reach out to people in your network who might have insights. You build a multidimensional picture rather than accepting any single narrative. If you're making a medical decision, you don't just trust the first doctor you see. You seek second opinions. You research the condition independently using reputable sources. You talk to others who have dealt with similar situations. You understand the risks and benefits of different approaches. You ask about alternatives. You make sure you understand the statistics and what they actually mean rather than just hearing. High success rate without context. One of the most valuable sources of information that people chronically underutilize is asking people who have already done what you're considering doing. If you're thinking about starting a business, talk to people who have started similar businesses and learn from their experiences, both successes and failures. If you're considering a career change, talk to people who made similar transitions and find out what they wish they'd known beforehand. If you're thinking about moving to a new city, talk to people who live there or have lived there and get the real story beyond the tourism website. People are generally willing to share their experiences and lessons learned if you approach them respectfully and ask thoughtful questions. And this experiential knowledge is often far more valuable than theoretical research because it comes from the real world with all its messy complexity. Now here's something crucial about gathering information. You also need to evaluate the quality and reliability of your sources. Not all information is created equal, and in our current age of misinformation, disinformation, and content created by algorithms optimized for engagement rather than truth, critical evaluation is essential. Ask yourself, does this source have relevant expertise or first-hand experience? What might be their biases or conflicts of interest? Is this information based on rigorous research or just opinion? Can be verified through multiple independent sources. Is this source trying to inform me or manipulate me toward a particular action? Does the information make sense logically, and does it align with other things I know to be true? Is this source cherry-picking data to support a predetermined conclusion or presenting a balanced view? These questions help you separate signal from noise, truth from spin, genuine insight from marketing disguised as information. Another critical aspect of gathering the right information is knowing what questions to ask, because often the most important information is not volunteered, it has to be specifically requested. So if you're interviewing for a job, don't just answer their questions, ask your own. Why is this position open? What happened to the last person in this role? What does success look like in the first 90 days and first year? What are the biggest challenges facing the team right now? How are decisions made in this organization? What's the turnover rate in this department? How is performance evaluated, and how often? What opportunities exist for professional development? Can I speak with someone who currently does this job or works closely with this position? If you're considering a major purchase like a house, ask about things the seller isn't likely to bring up. Why are you selling? How old is the roof? HVAC, water heater, and major appliances. Have there been any issues with water damage, pests, or structural problems? What are the actual utility costs month by month? What are the neighbors like? Are there any planned developments or zoning changes nearby? What internet speeds are actually available? What's the noise level at different times of day and on weekends? Asking the right questions often reveals information that completely changes your decision. There's also the matter of timing, knowing when you have enough information to make a decision versus when you're just procrastinating because you're afraid to commit, because gathering information can become a form of avoidance. Endlessly researching and analyzing as a way to postpone the discomfort of making a choice and taking responsibility for the outcome. So you need to set boundaries. What information is essential versus nice to have? What's my deadline for making this decision? What's the cost of delay versus the cost of a wrong decision? At what point do I have diminishing returns where gathering more information isn't significantly improving my decision quality? Sometimes good enough is actually optimal, especially for reversible decisions or when the opportunity cost of delay is high. It's also important to recognize that some information can only be gathered through action, through experimentation, through small tests before big commitments. So if you're considering a career change, maybe you could do some freelance work in that field first to test your assumptions. If you're thinking about starting a business, maybe you can validate the market need with a minimum viable product before investing your life savings. If you're considering moving to a new city, maybe you can spend a month there first during a typical season rather than just visiting once during perfect weather. These small experiments give you information that no amount of research could provide because they're based on your actual experience rather than others' generalizations. Now let me address something important. Gathering the right information doesn't mean analysis paralysis. It doesn't mean achieving perfect certainty, which is impossible anyway. It means making informed decisions rather than blind ones. It means reducing unnecessary risk by doing your homework. It means respecting yourself enough to invest time in decisions that will significantly impact your life. And yes, even with all the right information, things can still go wrong because life is uncertain. And circumstances change, but at least you'll know you made the best decision possible with the information available, and you won't waste energy on regret wondering if you'd just done a bit more research or asked a few more questions. You could have avoided a painful outcome. There's also something powerful that happens when you develop a reputation as someone who does their homework, who asks good questions, who gathers information thoroughly before acting. People trust you more, they respect your decisions, they're more willing to invest in your ventures or partner with you because they know you're not impulsive or reckless, that you think things through, that you'll catch problems others might miss. And this reputation becomes a tremendous asset throughout your life and career. Finally, understand that gathering the right information is a skill that improves with practice. The more you do it, the better you get at knowing what questions to ask, where to look, how to evaluate sources when you have enough information, how to synthesize disparate pieces into a coherent picture. And this skill compounds over time because each domain where you develop information gathering expertise makes you better in other domains. The questions you learn to ask when evaluating job offers help you evaluate business partnerships. The research methods you develop for health decisions help you make better financial decisions. The critical thinking you applied to one area transfers to others. And gradually you become someone who consistently makes better decisions than others around you, not because you're smarter or luckier, but simply because you've developed the discipline and skill to gather the right information before acting, and that simple practice applied consistently over time creates a massive advantage in life outcomes. The difference between stumbling through decisions, hoping for the best, and navigating with a map and compass, between being reactive and being strategic, between leaving your life to chance and actively architecting the future you want. So respect yourself enough, respect your time and resources enough, respect your future self enough to slow down. Ask better questions, seek out what you need to know, challenge your assumptions, and make decisions from a place of genuine understanding rather than ignorance disguised as confidence. Because the few hours or days you invest in gathering the right information before acting will often save you years of regret and unnecessary struggle afterward. The system's lens, how seeing connections transforms everything you touch. Let me tell you about a way of seeing the world that once you truly grasp it, you can never unsee it, and it will fundamentally change how you approach problems, make decisions, understand success and failure, navigate relationships, build businesses, improve your health, and essentially engage with every aspect of life. And this perspective is called systems thinking, which is the ability to see the big picture, to understand that nothing exists in isolation, that everything is connected to, Everything else through invisible webs of cause and effect, feedback loops, delays, dependencies, and emergent properties that only become visible when you zoom out and look at the whole rather than fixating on individual parts. Most of us, through no fault of our own because this is how we're educated and conditioned, have been trained to think linearly and reductively. We've been taught to break problems down into smaller pieces, to find the one cause for every effect, to look for the single solution that will fix the issue, to blame specific people when things go wrong, to credit specific factors when things go right. And while this approach has its uses, it's woefully inadequate for understanding and navigating the complex, interconnected, dynamic systems that actually make up reality, whether we're talking about ecosystems, economies, organizations, bodies, relationships, or societies. Think about how most people approach a problem. Let's say someone is struggling with their weight. The typical thinking goes, I'm overweight, therefore I need to eat less and exercise more. Calories in versus calories out. Simple physics. So they go on a diet, they start going to the gym, they white-knuckle their way through weeks of restriction and effort. Maybe they lose some weight initially, but then they plateau, or they can't sustain the regimen, or they lose weight but feel terrible, or they regain it all plus more, and they blame themselves for lacking willpower or discipline. They see it as a personal failure, a character flaw, one isolated problem with one simple solution that they just couldn't execute properly. But someone with systems thinking looks at the same situation completely differently. They see weight as just one visible output of a complex system that includes metabolism, hormones, gut bacteria, sleep quality, stress levels, emotional regulation, social environment, food availability and quality, work schedule, relationship dynamics, childhood conditioning around food, cultural messaging, inflammatory responses, genetic factors, pharmaceutical side effects, and dozens of other interconnected variables all influencing each other in feedback loops. So the question isn't, how do I eat less? But rather, what is this system trying to tell me through this symptom? What are all the factors contributing to this outcome? Which leverage points can I influence that will create positive ripple effects throughout the whole system? What am I not seeing? What second and third order effects will my interventions create? This shift from linear thinking to systems thinking is profound because it moves you from fighting symptoms to understanding root causes, from applying brute force to finding leverage points, from seeing failures as personal deficiencies to seeing them as feedback about system design, from feeling helpless in the face of complex problems to recognizing that small changes in the right places can create massive shifts in outcomes. Let me give you another example that might resonate. Imagine a company is struggling with high employee turnover. The linear thinking approach says, people are leaving, therefore we need to pay them more, offer better benefits. So they increase salaries across the board, maybe throw in some perks like free lunch or gym memberships. And sure, maybe this slows the turnover slightly, but it doesn't solve the fundamental problem. And it's expensive, and employees still seem disengaged, and the culture still feels toxic. And now leadership is frustrated because they're paying more but not getting better results. So they blame the employees for being entitled or ungrateful or disloyal. But systems thinking asks completely different questions. What is causing people to leave? Not just the surface reason they give in exit interviews, but the deeper systemic issues. And when you investigate with this lens, you might discover that the real issue is a broken communication system where information doesn't flow properly, leading to confusion and duplicated effort, or a promotion system that rewards the wrong behaviors, causing politics and backstabbing to flourish, or a hiring system that prioritizes credentials over culture fit, bringing in people who are never aligned with the company's values, or a workload distribution system that chronically overburdens certain people while others coast, breeding resentment, or a management training system that's non-existent, leaving managers with no skills to support their teams, or a feedback system that's either absent or perceived as punitive rather than developmental, or most likely, some combination of all these factors creating a reinforcing feedback loop where the best people leave, which increases the burden on those who remain, which decreases morale, which causes more people to leave, accelerating the decline. When you see the system, you realize that simply increasing salaries is like putting a Band-Aid on a bullet wound. It might provide temporary relief, but it doesn't address the systemic dysfunction, and the real leverage points might be things like redesigning how information flows through the organization, changing what behaviors get rewarded, improving the hiring process, training managers properly, creating genuine feedback mechanisms, redistributing workloads more equitably, clarifying roles and responsibilities. Each of these interventions creates positive ripple effects throughout the system. And when multiple leverage points are addressed simultaneously, you can achieve transformation that seemed impossible when you were just treating symptoms. Now, the key to systems thinking is understanding several core concepts that reveal how systems actually work. And the first is feedback loops, which are the circular chains of cause and effect that either amplify change. These are called reinforcing loops or dampen change. These are called balancing loops, and every system is full of these feedback loops operating simultaneously at different speeds and scales. A reinforcing feedback loop is like compound interest. A small initial amount grows, the growth generates more growth, which generates even more growth, accelerating over time. This is why the rich get richer, why successful people get more opportunities, why viral content spreads exponentially, why panic selling creates market crashes, why erosion creates bigger erosion. The system feeds on itself in a particular direction, and these loops can work positively or negatively. Wealth compounds. Positively, debt spirals compound negatively. Skill development compounds positively. Bad habits compound negatively. Reputation builds on itself positively. Scandals spiral negatively. A balancing feedback loop works like a thermostat. When the room gets too hot, the air conditioning kicks in to bring it back down. When it gets too cold, the heating turns on. The system self-regulates toward a set point, resisting change in either direction. And this is why diets often fail. Your body has metabolic set points and will fight to return to them. Why organizational changes often revert to old patterns. Why New Year's resolutions fade. Why social systems resist rapid change. The balancing loops kick in to maintain homeostasis, to preserve the status quo. And if you don't understand this, you'll keep pushing harder with the same interventions, getting frustrated that nothing seems to stick, when what you actually need to do is change the set point itself, or find ways to work with the system's natural balancing mechanisms rather than against them. Another crucial concept in systems thinking is delays, the time gap between cause and effect, between action and result. And this is where so many interventions fail, because we live in an instant gratification culture that expects immediate results. So we implement a solution, don't see results right away because there's a natural delay built into the system, conclude the solution isn't working, abandon it prematurely, and try something else, never giving any intervention enough time to work. Or worse, we keep adding more and more interventions on top of each other before the previous ones have had time to take effect, creating a chaotic mess where we can't even tell what's working and what's not. Think about farming. You plant seeds, you don't see anything for days or weeks. During that time, the seeds are germinating underground. Invisible progress is happening, but someone without patience or systems understanding might dig up the seeds to check if they're growing, or assume they're dead and plant different seeds, or add more fertilizer thinking more must be better, actually harming the system. Whereas a good farmer understands the natural delays, trusts the process, provides consistent care, and waits for the results that will come in their own time. The same principle applies to fitness, where you might work out consistently for weeks before seeing visible changes, to relationships where trust builds slowly over time through consistent actions, to business where you might invest in marketing or product development for months before seeing revenue impact, to education where learning compounds over years, not days. Understanding delays helps you maintain consistency through the invisible progress phase rather than abandoning effective strategies too early. Systems thinking also reveals the principle of leverage points, the idea that in any system, certain interventions have disproportionate impact, that you can push hard in most places and barely budge the system, but push gently in the right place and transform everything. And identifying these leverage points is an art that comes from truly understanding how the system works, what its key limiting factors are, what feedback loops dominate, where the delays are, what the system is optimized for. And often the highest leverage points are not obvious. They're not the places where everyone is already pushing. They're counterintuitive. They require systems literacy to even see. For example, in your personal productivity system, most people focus on time management, on cramming more tasks into their day, on working harder and longer, but that's low leverage because time is finite and willpower depletes. Much higher leverage is energy management, ensuring you're well-rested, properly nourished, and working on your most important tasks during your peak mental hours. Even higher leverage is decision management, reducing the number of decisions you make each day through routines and systems, freeing up mental bandwidth for what actually matters. And the highest leverage of all might be goal clarity, making sure you're working on the right things in the first place. Because perfect execution of the wrong strategy is worthless. So someone with systems thinking doesn't just work harder, they work on the system itself. They design their life and work in ways that create effortless momentum rather than constant friction. Another critical aspect of systems thinking is understanding emergent properties, characteristics that arise from the interactions between parts, but that don't exist in any individual part, like consciousness emerging from billions of neurons firing in patterns, or traffic jams emerging from individual drivers making local decisions with no one deliberately creating the jam, or market crashes emerging from countless individual trading decisions, or culture emerging from human interactions and shared beliefs, or health emerging from the interaction of countless biological processes. You cannot understand emergent properties by studying individual components in isolation. You have to see the whole, the patterns, the relationships, the dynamics, and this is why reduction is science. While valuable, has limits. You can study individual brain cells forever and never understand consciousness. You can study individual employees forever and never understand organizational culture. You can study individual consumer decisions forever and never predict market movements. The whole is genuinely different from and greater than the sum of its parts. Systems thinking also makes you humble because you realize how little control you actually have, how intervening in complex systems always creates unintended consequences, how your actions ripple out in ways you cannot fully predict, how systems have their own logic and momentum that resists your individual will. This doesn't mean you're powerless, but it means you approach intervention with caution, with humility, with willingness to observe and adjust, with recognition that you're part of the system, not separate from it, that your presence and actions are already influencing the system whether you intend them to or not, and that the best you can do is act with awareness, make small experiments, gather feedback, and iterate rather than assuming you can engineer perfect outcomes through force of will or clever planning. Let me show you how systems thinking applies to relationships, because this is an area where most people are completely blind to system dynamics. Someone says, "My partner never listens to me," they're dismissive, they're the problem, but systems thinking asks, what system are we both participants in? What patterns have we co-created? How do my behaviors influence their behaviors, which influence my behaviors in a feedback loop? What am I not seeing about my own contribution to this dynamic? And when you investigate honestly, you might realize that you've developed a pattern where you bring up important topics when your partner is tired or distracted, so they don't engage fully, which makes you feel unheard, so you bring things up more urgently and emotionally next time, which makes them defensive, so they withdraw further, which makes you pursue harder, creating a pursue-withdraw cycle that's deeply entrenched. Neither person is the problem. You're both stuck in a systemic pattern, and the solution isn't to change the other person, it's to change your own participation in the dance, to break the pattern by responding differently, maybe bringing things up at better times, maybe changing your tone, maybe addressing the meta-pattern explicitly. And when one person changes their steps in the dance, the whole system has to reconfigure, creating space for new patterns to emerge. Systems thinking also helps you understand why willpower and individual effort often fail. Because if the system you're embedded in is designed to produce certain outcomes, your individual resistance requires enormous ongoing energy. It's like swimming upstream. You can do it for a while, but eventually you'll tire. Whereas changing the system, changing your environment, changing the default options, changing the path of least resistance, creates outcomes that flow naturally without constant effort. If you want to eat healthier but your kitchen is full of junk food, you're fighting the system every time you're hungry and tired. But if you design your system differently by simply not buying junk food, by preparing healthy meals in advance, by making the healthy choice the easy choice, you're working with system dynamics rather than against them. If you want to exercise more but you have to drive 30 minutes to a gym, pack a bag. Deal with crowds. That system has too much friction. But if you keep workout equipment at home, or find an activity you genuinely enjoy, or schedule workouts with a friend who will hold you accountable, you've redesigned the system to make the desired behavior more likely. This is why environmental design is so powerful, why surrounding yourself with certain people dramatically influences who you become, why the systems and structures you build in your business determine outcomes more than individual motivation, why culture eats strategy for breakfast, as they say. The system is always more powerful than individual intention. So wise people design systems that make the right choices automatic or at least easier. They architect their environment, their relationships, their schedules, their businesses with systems thinking, understanding that structure drives behavior and behavior drives results. Now here's something profound about systems, thinking, and organizations and society. It reveals why so many well-intentioned interventions fail or even backfire, because complex systems have counterintuitive properties. Pushing harder often makes things worse, not better. Quick fixes that relieve symptoms in the short term often strengthen the underlying problem in the long term. Easy solutions often just shift the problem to another part of the system or to a different time scale. For instance, when a company is struggling financially, the obvious solution seems to be cutting costs, so they lay off people, reduce training budgets, defer maintenance, cut quality initiatives, and in the short term, the numbers look better, crisis averted. But what actually happens systemically is that the remaining employees are now overworked, stressed, and insecure. So productivity drops and mistakes increase. There's no training, so people don't develop skills needed for evolving. Challenges, deferred maintenance leads to bigger problems and costlier fixes later. Quality issues damage reputation and customer loyalty, and talented people leave for more stable opportunities. So the company enters a death spiral where cost-cutting creates the conditions that necessitate more cost-cutting, when the real systemic solution might have been investing in innovation, improving processes, enhancing value proposition, things that require short-term investment but create long-term health. But linear thinking only sees the immediate symptom and applies the obvious solution without considering systemic consequences. The same pattern plays out in education policy, where test scores are declining, so the solution is teaching to the test, drilling standardized content, pressuring teachers and students, and scores might improve in the short term, but you've actually undermined the system because now students hate learning, creativity and critical thinking aren't developed, teachers burn out. The joy and intrinsic motivation that drive deep learning are destroyed, and you've optimized for the metric rather than the actual goal, which was genuine education. This is Goodhart's law. When a measure becomes a target, it ceases to be a good measure, and it happens because of shallow linear thinking rather than systems understanding. Systems thinking also reveals the tragedy of the commons, situations where individual rational decisions lead to collective irrational outcomes. Like overfishing, where each fisher acts rationally by catching as much as possible, but collectively they deplete the fish population, harming everyone, including themselves. Or traffic, where each driver chooses the fastest route, creating congestion that makes everyone slower. Or social media platforms, where each company optimizes for engagement, creating an attention economy that harms users' well-being and society's information ecosystem. These are systemic problems that cannot be solved by individual action alone. They require changing the rules of the game, the incentive structures, the feedback mechanisms, the governance systems. And this is where policy, leadership, and institutional design matter tremendously, because they can change system parameters in ways that align individual incentives with collective well-being. But systems thinking isn't just for big societal issues. It's incredibly practical for your daily life. When you see everything as a system, you start asking better questions. If you're tired all the time, instead of just drinking more coffee, which is treating the symptom, you investigate the system. How's my sleep quality and duration? what my stress level, what's my nutrition like, how much am I moving, what's my mental emotional state, are there underlying health issues, what medications am I taking, what's my work schedule, and you realize that your tiredness is an output of multiple interacting factors. So you make systematic changes addressing multiple leverage points, and the problem resolves not through willpower, but through system design. If your business isn't growing, instead of just doing more marketing or adding more features, you examine the whole system. What's the customer journey? Where do people drop off and why? What's the value proposition? How does word of mouth work or not work? What's the sales process? How's customer service? What's the pricing strategy? How's the team functioning? What's the company culture? What systems and processes exist or don't exist? And you find that maybe the real constraint isn't marketing at all. Maybe it's that customer service is poor, so retention is terrible, or the sales process is confusing, or the product isn't delivering on promises, or team communication is broken. Fixing the actual systemic constraint rather than pushing harder on marketing creates breakthrough results. The beautiful thing about developing systems thinking is that it makes you more effective with less effort because you're working on the right things in the right ways. You're finding leverage rather than applying brute force. You're designing systems rather than fighting them. You're addressing root causes rather than symptoms. You're thinking long-term and considering unintended consequences. You're humble about complexity while being strategic about intervention. And over time, this compounds into dramatically better outcomes in every domain of life. Whether you're trying to improve your health, grow your wealth, build better relationships, create impact in your work, or contribute to your community, systems thinking gives you a lens that reveals what others miss, patterns that others can't see, leverage points that others overlook, and this perspective, once truly integrated, becomes your secret superpower. The difference between constant struggle and elegant effectiveness, between treating symptoms endlessly and solving problems permanently, between being buffeted by forces you don't understand and consciously shaping the systems you're part of. So start practicing this lens. When you encounter any problem or situation, pause and ask, what's the system here? What are the feedback loops? Where are the delays? What are the leverage points? What am I not seeing? What are the second and third order effects of possible interventions? How are all the parts interconnected? What patterns keep repeating? And as you practice this way of seeing, you'll find that the big picture gradually comes into focus, revealing a world that's far more interconnected, more elegant, more comprehensible, and more workable than the fragmented chaos it appeared to be before you learned to see the whole. The time machine in your mind, how mental simulations and the October 10th 10 rule transform decision-making. Let me introduce you to two of the most powerful yet underutilized decision-making tools that exist, tools that cost nothing, require no special training, can be deployed anywhere at any time, and yet have the potential to save you from years of regret, unnecessary suffering, and painful consequences while simultaneously opening doors to opportunities and possibilities you might otherwise miss. And these tools are mental simulations and the October 10th 10 rule, which when used together create a kind of time machine in your mind that allows you to test different futures before committing to them, to see around corners, to learn from mistakes you haven't made yet, to distinguish between what feels good right now and what will actually serve your long-term well-being, and to make decisions from a place of wisdom rather than impulse. You see, one of the fundamental challenges of being human is that we experience time linearly. We're always standing in the present moment. We can remember the past with varying degrees of accuracy, and we can imagine the future, but only abstractly. And this creates a profound bias in our decision-making because the present moment, with all its immediate emotions, pressures, temptations, and circumstances, has a gravitational pull that distorts our judgment, making us overvalue immediate gratification and undervalue future consequences, causing us to make choices that our future selves will regret, to sacrifice long-term well-being for short-term comfort, to avoid short-term discomfort even when it leads to long-term pain. And this temporal myopia, this inability to truly feel the future as vividly as we feel the present, is responsible for so many of the bad decisions people make throughout their lives. Think about it. If you could actually feel with full emotional intensity what it will be like 10 years from now when you're dealing with the health consequences of poor eating habits today. You'd probably make different food choices right now. If you could truly experience what it will feel like to be financially stressed in your 60s because you didn't save in your 30s, you'd probably start investing today. If you could viscerally feel the regret of not pursuing your creative passion when you're on your deathbed, you'd probably make time for it now despite being busy. If you could genuinely experience how much you'll miss someone after they're gone, you'd probably treat them better while they're here, but we can't naturally feel these future realities with any intensity. They're abstract, distant, hypothetical, easily dismissed, and so we make choices based on how we feel right now, what's convenient right now, what's comfortable right now, what others expect right now. And then we're surprised when future consequences arrive, feeling very real and very painful. This is where mental simulations come in, because while you can't actually travel through time, you can use your remarkable human imagination to create detailed, vivid, emotionally engaging simulations of different possible futures, essentially running experiments in your mind before running them in your life, testing different paths, exploring different decisions, experiencing different outcomes, all without risk, all without cost, all without irreversible commitment. And when done properly, mental simulation is not just daydreaming or wishful thinking. It's a rigorous cognitive process that helps you make better decisions by allowing you to preview consequences, identify problems before they occur, prepare for challenges, recognize opportunities, and build the emotional connection to your future self that's necessary for wise long-term decision-making. Let me explain how mental simulation actually works and why it's so powerful. Your brain has this incredible capacity for imagination, for creating detailed scenarios that feel real even though they're not. This is the same capacity that allows you to enjoy novels and movies, to plan for events, to worry about things that haven't happened, to learn from others' experiences. And when you deliberately harness this capacity for decision-making, you're essentially creating a low-cost, low-risk laboratory where you can test different versions of reality. You close your eyes, you vividly imagine yourself making a particular choice, you walk through the immediate aftermath in detail, you imagine the downstream consequences, you notice what you think, how you feel, what happens, who's affected, what opportunities open or close, what second and third order effects emerge. And by making this simulation as detailed and realistic as possible, engaging all your senses and emotions, you create neural patterns similar to what you'd experience if it were actually happening. Your brain doesn't entirely distinguish between vividly imagined experiences and real ones at a neurological level, which is why visualization is so powerful for athletes, performers, and anyone preparing for high-stakes situations. Now, let me give you some concrete examples of how to use mental simulation effectively, because this isn't just vague visualization. It's a structured process. Imagine you're considering taking a new job in a different city. Rather than just thinking abstractly about pros and cons, you would close your eyes and run a detailed simulation. You imagine your first day at the new job, walking into the building, meeting your new colleagues, sitting at your desk. What's the energy like? How do people interact? How do you feel? Then you fast forward through the first weeks and months. Imagine your daily routine in this new city where you're living, what your commute is like, what you do on evenings and weekends, who you spend time with. Do you have friends, or are you lonely? How's your lifestyle different from now? What have you gained? What have you lost? Then you simulate a year in. How's your career developing? Have the promises made during hiring materialized? What's your relationship like with your manager? Are you learning and growing or stagnating? How's your work-life balance? What's your financial situation? And then you simulate the alternative path, staying in your current job or city, imagining that future with equal detail and honesty. And by running both simulations with genuine emotional engagement, you often discover insights that a simple pros-cons list would never reveal. You might realize that while the new job pays more, you're simulating yourself feeling isolated and disconnected. Or you might discover that staying put means you're simulating yourself feeling increasingly resentful and stuck. These emotional data points are crucial because they're telling you something about your deeper values and needs. Mental simulation is incredibly powerful for relationship decisions. If you're considering marrying someone, don't just think about how you feel right now in the excitement of courtship. Simulate your life together 5, 10, 20 years out, imagine living with this person day after day, handling mundane responsibilities, going through stress together, raising children if that's your plan, dealing with career pressures, navigating conflicts, supporting each other through difficult times, experiencing the ordinary moments that actually make up most of life. Imagine yourselves aging together. What do you see? Do you feel genuinely excited and peaceful about that future, or do warning signs emerge? Do you see yourself growing together or growing apart? Are your core values and life goals actually aligned, or are you hoping they'll change? Simulation helps you distinguish between infatuation and genuine compatibility, between fantasy and reality, between who someone is showing you they are right now versus who they actually are when the performance ends. The same applies to major purchases and financial decisions. Before buying that expensive car or house, or taking on significant debt, simulate living with that decision. Imagine making those monthly payments, month after month, year after year. What else are you not doing because of those payments? What opportunities are you missing? What stress are you experiencing? How does it actually feel versus how you think it will feel? Or simulate the alternative of saving and investing that money. Instead, imagine yourself 10 years from now with financial freedom, with options, with security. What does that feel like? Which future is more compelling when you really sit with it? Often people discover through simulation that the emotional satisfaction of a purchase is very brief, while the financial burden is very long, or that the temporary disappointment of not buying something is far less painful than they imagined. And this insight shifts their decision-making. Now, mental simulation becomes even more powerful when combined with the October 10th 10 rule, which is a simple but profound framework created by Susie Welch that forces you to consider 3 different time horizons when making decisions. How will I feel about this decision 10 minutes from now, 10 months from now, and 10 years from now? And the magic of this framework is that it immediately reveals the disconnect between short-term and long-term perspectives. It shows you when you're making decisions that satisfy the present at the expense of the future, or when you're being so focused on the future that you're unnecessarily sacrificing the present. And it creates a more balanced, holistic view of what the right choice actually is. Let me show you how this works in practice across different scenarios. Imagine you're at a social event, and someone makes a comment that offends you. Your immediate impulse is to snap back with a cutting remark, so you apply the October 10th 10 rule. 10 minutes from now, if I respond harshly, I'll probably feel some satisfaction, maybe some vindication. That felt good in a moment. 10 months from now, I might regret it. That person might now be an enemy instead of a neutral party. I might have damaged my reputation with others who witnessed it. The momentary satisfaction will be long forgotten, but the consequences might linger. 10 years from now, I'll barely remember this incident existed, but if I responded with grace and dignity, I'll have strengthened my character and self-respect. Suddenly, the right choice becomes clear. The short-term emotional payoff of lashing out is vastly outweighed by the medium and long-term costs, and you choose to respond thoughtfully or not at all. Or consider you're exhausted after a long day and you're deciding whether to watch Netflix or work on that important project you keep postponing. 10 minutes from now, Netflix feels so much better. You're tired. You deserve rest. You'll feel immediately relaxed and entertained. 10 months from now, if you've consistently chosen Netflix over your project, you'll be exactly where you are now. No progress. Maybe increased frustration that nothing's changing. Maybe shame about another year of inaction. But if you spend even 30 minutes on your project today and do that consistently, you'll have made real progress toward a goal that matters. 10 years from now, will you remember the episodes you watched tonight? Absolutely not. Will you remember that you finally pursued the thing that mattered to you? That you built something, created something, developed skills, made progress? Absolutely yes, and suddenly the choice shifts. You might still choose to rest because rest is genuinely needed, and that's fine, but you're making that choice consciously rather than on autopilot. And you might choose to do even 15 minutes on your project first, honoring both your present need for rest and your future self's aspirations. The October 10th 10 rule is particularly powerful for health decisions because health consequences operate on such delayed timescales that we chronically underweight them. That piece of cake, that skipped workout, that night of poor sleep, 10 minutes from now feels great, or at least neutral. 10 months from now, the cumulative effect of hundreds of such choices becomes visible in your energy levels, how you look and feel, your biomarkers, your mood. 10 years from now, the trajectory you're on now determines whether you're vital and healthy or managing chronic conditions, whether you're aging gracefully or struggling. And when you vividly simulate these different 10-year outcomes, the choice becomes clearer, not in a way that makes you miserable or rigid, but in a way that helps you make choices from wisdom rather than just impulse. Financial decisions become dramatically clearer through the October 10 lens. That impulse purchase, that lifestyle inflation as your income grows, that decision to not start investing because you'll do it later. 10 minutes from now, you barely remember the purchase, or you feel a brief hit of pleasure, or you feel no pain from not investing. 10 months from now, that purchase might be forgotten, broken, or regretted. That lifestyle inflation means you're on a treadmill where no amount of income feels sufficient. That delay in investing means you've missed months of compound growth. 10 years from now, the thousands of dollars you spent on forgettable purchases could have been hundreds of thousands invested in growing. The lifestyle choices you made created either freedom or golden handcuffs where you're trapped by your expenses. And suddenly the importance of aligning your daily financial choices with your long-term vision becomes visceral, not through shame or fear, but through genuine understanding of cause and effect across time. The combination of mental simulation and the October 10 rule is particularly powerful when facing crossroads decisions, the kind of choices that will significantly alter your life trajectory, whether to end a relationship, whether to start a business, whether to have children, whether to relocate, whether to change careers, whether to go back to school. These are decisions where the stakes are high and the consequences long-lasting. So you need tools that help you think clearly beyond emotion and confusion of the present moment. Let's say you're considering leaving a stable career to start your own business. You simulate and apply October 10 minutes from now. Quitting feels terrifying. You're giving up security, a steady paycheck, benefits, status. What if you fail? What will people think? The fear is intense. 10 months from now, you simulate two paths. If you started the business, you're through the initial terror. You're learning rapidly, facing challenges, making progress, or learning valuable lessons. You've proven to yourself that you can handle uncertainty. You're building something that's yours, or maybe you're struggling and realizing entrepreneurship isn't for you. But at least you know if you stayed in your job, you're still secure. But the voice inside asking, what if, is louder. The regret is building. You feel increasingly trapped. 10 years from now, if you started the business, regardless of whether that specific venture succeeded, you've developed skills, resilience, confidence, networks, and possibilities that wouldn't exist otherwise. You might have created the life and work you truly wanted, or you might have returned to employment. But as someone who tried, who knows themselves better, who has no regrets if you stayed in your job, you might be further up the corporate ladder, but is that ladder leaning against the right wall? Do you wonder what could have been? Have you taught yourself that security matters more than fulfillment? What does that feel like, these simulations? Done honestly, reveal what matters most to you and help you make decisions aligned with your deepest values rather than your surface fears. One of the subtle but important aspects of both mental simulation and the October 10 rule is that they create psychological distance from your immediate emotional state, which is crucial because we make terrible decisions when we're in the grip of strong emotions, whether that's anger, fear, desire, shame, or excitement. These emotions hijack our prefrontal cortex and make it very difficult to think clearly about consequences. But when you deliberately step back and simulate the future or consider different time horizons, you're re-engaging your rational mind. You're creating space between stimulus and response. You're accessing wisdom that's available to you, but gets drowned out by the noise of the present moment. There's also something profound about how these tools strengthen your relationship with your future self, because most of us don't really believe in our future self. It feels like a different person, someone theoretical, someone who'll somehow handle whatever consequences we create today. And this disconnect is why we make self-destructive choices. But when you regularly practice mental simulation and consider your future across multiple time horizons, you start to feel genuine connection to That future person, you realize that your future self is you, that you're creating their reality right now. And this creates a sense of responsibility and compassion toward them. You start making different choices, not from willpower or discipline, but from genuine care for someone you've come to know through these mental visits to possible futures. Now let me address some important nuances about using these tools effectively. First, mental simulation works best when it's realistic and emotionally honest, not when it's either catastrophizing or fantasizing. You're not trying to scare yourself with worst-case scenarios or seduce yourself with best-case scenarios. You're trying to simulate the most likely scenarios with all their complexity, which means including both challenges and rewards, both what you'll gain and what you'll lose, both the excitement and a mundane daily reality. The more honest and detailed your simulation, the more valuable the insights. Second, the October 10 rule isn't about always choosing what's best for the long term at the expense of the present. That would be a miserable way to live, constantly sacrificing now for later, never enjoying anything because you're always optimizing for some future payoff. Sometimes the right choice is the one that serves the present moment because joy, connection, rest, and spontaneity have genuine value. The point is making these choices consciously, understanding the trade-offs, ensuring that your immediate choices don't consistently undermine your long-term well-being, and that your focus on the future doesn't rob you of the only time that actually exists, which is now. It's about balance and awareness, not about rigid optimization. Third, these tools work best when you use them before you're in crisis mode or already committed. Try to do mental simulation when you're already emotionally invested in a particular outcome is difficult because confirmation bias kicks in and you'll simulate in ways that justify what you already want to do. So the ideal time to use these tools is before major decisions, as a regular practice for medium-sized decisions, and as a way of reflecting on patterns in your life to understand what's working and what's not. Think of it as preventive medicine for your life, using these tools to avoid problems rather than fix them after they've already created damage. Fourth, mental simulation becomes more accurate over time as you calibrate it against reality. When you simulate a future and then actually live it, you can look back and see what you got right and what you got wrong in your simulation, what you overlooked, what you overweight, what you underweight. And this feedback makes your future simulations more accurate. So keep notes, write down what you imagine will happen, and then revisit those predictions later. This metacognitive practice of learning how well you predict develops genuine wisdom about what matters and what doesn't, about how you personally respond to different situations, about what brings you lasting satisfaction versus fleeting pleasure. You can also enhance mental simulation by seeking input from people who have already lived the experience you're considering. If you're thinking about having children, talk to parents honestly about the reality, not just the highlights, but the daily challenges, the identity shifts, the relationship changes, the financial impact, the loss of freedom, the profound meaning, all of it, and integrate their lived experience into your simulation. If you're considering a career change, talk to people who made similar transitions. Learn what they wish they'd known, what surprised them, what was harder and easier than expected. Other people's experiences provide data points that make your simulations more realistic and comprehensive. The October 10 rule can also be adapted to different timescales depending on the decision. For some decisions, 10 minutes, 10 days, and 10 weeks might be appropriate. For others, it might be 10 hours, 10 months, and 10 years, or even 10 years, 20 years, and on your deathbed. The specific numbers matter less than the principle of considering multiple time horizons, so you're not being dominated by any single temporal perspective. You're seeing the full landscape of consequences across time. And this fuller picture naturally leads to wiser choices. There's also tremendous value in using these tools collectively. In relationships, families, organizations, teams, when facing decisions together, taking time to collectively simulate different futures and discuss how you each imagine things unfolding, what concerns emerge, what opportunities you see, what different people value. This shared simulation builds alignment, surfaces hidden assumptions, reveals potential problems before they occur, and creates buy-in because everyone has contributed to understanding the choice rather than having it imposed. Couples who regularly use these tools together, asking, How will we feel about this 10 years from now? Make better decisions about everything from spending to parenting to career choices to relationship priorities, and they avoid the resentment that comes from one person making unilateral decisions that both have to live with. Finally, understand that these tools don't guarantee you'll make perfect decisions. Life is uncertain. Surprising things happen. Contexts change. You grow and change in ways you can't predict. Sometimes you'll simulate a future and choose accordingly, and things will work out differently than expected. And that's okay. The goal isn't omniscience. It's making better decisions with the information and understanding available to you now. And even when things don't work out as hoped, you'll have the peace of knowing you thought it through carefully. You considered consequences. You didn't make an impulsive choice you could have easily avoided. You gave yourself the best chance of a good outcome. And that's all anyone can do, but doing that consistently over time, making thoughtful choices guided by mental simulation and consideration of multiple time horizons, compounds into a dramatically better life than the alternative of stumbling through decision after decision based purely on how you feel in the moment, reacting to circumstances, hoping for the best, and then dealing with preventable consequences. So practice these tools, make them habits. Use your remarkable human capacity for mental time travel to become a better steward of your own future. And watch as your decisions improve, your regrets decrease, your alignment with your values strengthens, and your life progressively becomes more of what you actually want it to be rather than just what happened to you by default. The growth crucible. Why your struggles are your curriculum. Let me share with you a perspective shift so fundamental that once you truly internalize it, it can transform not just how you approach challenges and setbacks, but your entire relationship with life itself, changing you from someone who is defeated by difficulties into someone who is forged and strengthened by them, from someone who fears failure into someone who minds it for wisdom, from someone who sees obstacles as evidence of their inadequacy into someone who sees them as precisely the curriculum they need to become who they're meant to be. And this shift is simply this. Every challenge you face is training. Every failure is feedback. Every setback is information. Every difficulty is development. And the universe is not punishing you or proving you're not good enough. It's offering you exactly the experiences you need to grow into the person capable of achieving what you want to achieve. And the only question is whether you'll accept the invitation to learn or whether you'll resist, complain, give up, or stay stuck in victimhood. You see, most of us have been conditioned from childhood to see challenges as problems, as things that shouldn't be happening, as evidence that something is wrong either with us or with the world. When we struggle with something that comes easily to others, we conclude we're not smart enough or talented enough. When we fail at something we attempted, we interpret it as confirmation that we should give up or that we were foolish to try. When life gets difficult, when we face obstacles, when things don't work out as planned, we say, why me? Why is this happening to me? This isn't fair. I don't deserve this. And we contract, we resist, we complain, we feel sorry for ourselves, we look for someone or something to blame. And in that contracted state of resistance and victimhood, we cannot learn, we cannot grow, we cannot extract the value that the challenge is offering us. We're so busy being upset that things are hard that we miss the entire point, which is that hard is where the growth happens, that challenges are not obstacles to your development. They're the mechanism of your development. That failure is not the opposite of success. It's part of the process of success, an essential ingredient without which success is actually impossible. Think about how muscles grow. They don't grow from comfort. They don't grow from doing what's easy. They grow from being stressed beyond their current capacity, from lifting weight that's challenging, that creates micro tears in the muscle fibers. And then during rest, those fibers repair themselves stronger than before, ready to handle that stress next time. And then you gradually increase the weight, creating new stress, new micro tears, new adaptation. And over time, you become dramatically stronger. But here's what doesn't work. Lifting the same comfortable weight forever, or lifting once, experiencing soreness, and concluding this hurts, I'm not good at this, I should quit, or comparing yourself to someone who's been training for years and feeling discouraged, or expecting results immediately without putting in consistent work over time. or getting injured because you try to lift too much too soon without building foundation. And yet this is exactly how most people approach challenges in life. They want the results, the strength, the capability, but they resist the process that creates those results. They want success without failure, mastery without struggle, achievement without challenge. And then they're confused and discouraged when growth doesn't happen. Let me tell you what elite performers across every domain understand that most people don't, whether they're athletes, musicians, entrepreneurs, scientists, artists, or leaders in any field. They understand viscerally that challenges are not interruptions to their development. Challenges are their development. That the difficulty is the point. That the place where they struggle is precisely where they need to focus, because that's where growth happens. A world-class violinist doesn't spend there practice time playing pieces they've already mastered. That would be comfortable but useless. They spend their time on the passages they keep messing up, the techniques they haven't yet mastered, the pieces that push them beyond their current ability. That's where the practice time goes, because they understand that difficulty indicates opportunity, that struggle means they're at their growth edge. And they've trained themselves to feel excitement rather than discouragement when they encounter something hard, because hard means, here's where I could get better. The same mindset exists in elite athletes who understand that the workout that feels impossible today is building the capacity that will make them faster, stronger, more resilient tomorrow. That pain in training is not punishment. It's information about where they're pushing their limits. That failure to complete a drill or hit a target is not evidence of inadequacy. It's feedback about what specifically needs work. And they've learned to depersonalize the struggle, to not make it mean something about their worth or talent, but to simply treat it as data, as information, as part of the process. And this shift from I failed, therefore I'm a failure, to I failed, what can I learn from this, is the difference between people who give up after setbacks and people who. And over time, over many challenges and many failures and many times of consciously choosing the learning perspective, it becomes more natural, more automatic, until eventually it's just who you are, someone who sees challenges as opportunities, who minds failures for wisdom, who knows that the difficulties you face are not evidence that something is wrong, but evidence that you're growing, you're evolving, you're becoming capable of more than you were before. And that person, the person forged through challenges, refined through failures, strengthened through struggles. That person is capable of creating and achieving and contributing and becoming things that the comfort-seeking version of you never could have imagined. So embrace the training, extract the feedback, trust the process, and know that everything you're going through right now is preparing you for everything you're becoming. Strategic thinking isn't about being smarter than everyone else. It's about being more intentional than yesterday. Every challenge you face from this point forward is no longer a roadblock. It's a training ground. Every setback isn't a failure. It's feedback. And every decision you make from here on can move you closer to the life you actually want. If this video shifted even one thought inside your mind, don't let that momentum die here. Subscribe to the channel for more powerful ideas that sharpen your thinking and elevate your life. Like this video, it helps this message reach people who need it most. Comment below what insight hit you the hardest. Your words might inspire someone else. And share this video with someone who's ready to think differently and live strategically. Remember, the world doesn't reward effort alone. It rewards clarity, timing, and action. Stay sharp, stay strategic, and we'll see you in the next one.